There are people right now in their 50s, 60s who are still competing at a level most people in their 30s can't touch. Not because they're genetically gifted, not because they're training more hours, and definitely not because they're just pushing harder. It's because they're in the right environment. And if you're over 40 and you still care about competing, you already feel the gap. The gap between what you know is possible and what your current training is actually producing. Because on one side, you've got people telling you to slow down. Be careful, just stay active, don't push it. And on the other side, you've got training environments built for younger athletes. Faster, more volume, recover overnight, and do it again. And you're stuck right in the middle, trying to push, but also trying not to break. And here's the part that almost nobody says out loud. Most masters athletes right now are not underperforming because of their age. They're underperforming because of where they train. Let me say that again. It's not your age, it's your environment. Because if you're honest, you already feel it every time you walk in. You walk into a typical gym and something doesn't quite fit. Either it's too soft, nobody's really pushing, nobody's really chasing anything, or it's too chaotic and you're just trying to survive the workout. There's no middle ground. There's no place that actually understands you still want to compete. You still want to improve. But you also need to train intelligently. And because that place doesn't exist, you start adjusting. Not strategically, reactively. You hold back when you shouldn't. You push when you should. You guess. And over time, that guessing starts to cost you. Not just physically, mentally. Because now you're asking yourself, why am I not improving? Why do I feel more beat up than I should? Why does this feel harder than it used to? And the answer you start to accept is, well, maybe this is just what getting older looks like. And I'm telling you right now, that's not true. I'm 63, I still train, I still compete, I still expect improvement. And I can tell you from experience, the difference is not effort. It's not discipline. It's not even programming. The difference is the environment. Because when the environment is right, everything changes. How you train, how you recover, how you think about what's possible. And right now, that environment doesn't exist. Not for masters athletes who are serious. Not for people who still want to compete, not just participate. And that's the problem. But it's also the opportunity. Because the real question isn't, can masters athletes still perform at a high level? We already know that answer. The real question is, what would happen if masters athletes actually had a place built for them? Not adapted, not modified, built for them. Because I've been thinking about that question a lot. And what I realized is this: if that place doesn't exist, it's not going to magically show up. It has to be built. And that's exactly what we're about to do. There's a reason you feel that gap. And it's not random, it's structural. It's built into the way most training environments are designed. And once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it. Because what you're experiencing is what I call the mixed room problem. And this is where almost everything starts to break down. Because on the surface, it looks like a good thing. Different ages, different levels, everyone pushing together. That sounds like community. That sounds like energy. That sounds like what you want. But underneath that, there's a problem. Because everyone in that room is operating under completely different reality. Different recovery windows, different injury history, different capacity to absorb stress. But they're all being fed the same stimulus, same workout, same clock, same expectation to keep up. And at first, you don't question it. You just adjust. You scale a little. You pace a little differently. You tell yourself you're being smart. But what you're actually doing is adapting to an environment that wasn't designed for you. And that's where the problem really begins. Because now you're not training for progress. You're training to fit. You're trying to stay in the game instead of moving forward in it. And that creates a second layer most people never recognize. Because over time, that adjustment turns into something else, something slower, more subtle, but way more dangerous. And that's what I call the competition gap. And this one is harder to see because it doesn't hit all at once. It builds over time. Because if you don't have the right environment, you don't have the right standard. And if you don't have the right standard, you don't actually know what good looks like anymore. So you start measuring yourself against the room instead of measuring yourself against your potential. And that's where things quietly start to shift. You stop chasing performance and start chasing completion. You stop pushing for improvement and start managing fatigue. You stop competing and start surviving workouts. And the crazy part is, it still feels like you're working hard. It still feels like you're doing the right things, but you're not progressing. You're maintaining position inside a system that was never designed to move you forward. And this is where most masters athletes get stuck. Not because they don't care, not because they're not disciplined, but because they don't have the right environment to demand more from them and support them when they go after it. And here's where it gets even more interesting, because most people don't leave that environment. They normalize it. They start to believe this is just how it is now. This is what training feels like at this age. This is as good as it gets. And once that belief sets in, everything slows down. Progress, confidence, ambition, and it doesn't happen overnight. It happens quietly, one workout at a time, until eventually you're not the athlete you used to be. Not because you can't be, but because the system around you never gave you a real shot. And that's the part that should bother you, because this isn't about effort. It's not about motivation. It's not about wanting it more. It's about being in an environment that actually makes high performance possible. And right now, most people simply aren't. Let me show you what this actually looks like when the environment is right. Because this isn't theory. This isn't some idea I came up with. I've seen both sides of this. I built one of the largest CrossFit facilities in the world. I sold it in 2016. And I have watched thousands of athletes come through a system. Young athletes, elite athletes, masters athletes. And I can tell you the ones who kept improving over time, the ones who kept competing, the ones who didn't fall off, were not the ones who just trained the hardest. They were the ones in the right environment. And when that environment is right, something very specific starts to happen. The first thing that changes is clarity, because now you're not guessing anymore. You're not walking into a workout thinking, should I push this? Should I hold back? Is this too much? That decision is already built into the system. The environment dictates the standard. So now you can actually train instead of constantly managing uncertainty. The second thing that changes is progression, because now everything you're doing has direction. You're not just working hard, you're working towards something. There's structure, there's intention, there's a path forward. And when that exists, progress becomes predictable, not random, not occasional, consistent. And that's a completely different experience. The third thing that changes is recovery. And this is where most people get it wrong. They think recovery is about doing less. It's not. It's about doing the right amount in the right context. Because when the environment is right, the stress you're applying actually matches your ability to absorb it. So instead of constantly feeling beat up, you start feeling capable again. You start feeling like, I can go again tomorrow. I can push again this week. And that changes everything, because now momentum starts to build. And once momentum builds, performance follows. And this is the part that most people have never experienced, not consistently, because they've always been adjusting to the wrong environment. And here's the biggest shift of all, the one that changes how you see yourself. When the environment is right, you stop thinking like someone who's trying to hold on, and you start thinking like someone who's still improving. That's a completely different identity. You're no longer asking, how do I not lose what I have? You're asking, how far can I actually go? And once that switch flips, you don't go back. Because now you've seen what's possible. Now you've felt what it's like to train with intention, to recover with purpose, to move forward instead of just maintaining. And that creates a problem. Because once you've seen that, once you understand that, you can't unsee what's wrong with the current system. You can't walk back into the same environment and pretend it's enough, because now you know exactly what's missing. And that's where most people get stuck, right in the middle, aware, but with nowhere to go, because the environment they actually need still doesn't exist. So now you're in a different place because you can see it. You can feel it. And whether you've said it out loud or not, you already know something isn't right with how you're training. And here's the moment that matters, because this is where most people do one of two things. They either acknowledge it and then they go right back to what they've been doing, or they decide they're done pretending it's enough. And the reason most people go back is because it's familiar, it's convenient, it's what they've always done. They tell themselves it's close enough, it's good enough, it's working kind of, but you already know the truth. If it was working, you wouldn't still be searching. You wouldn't feel that gap. You wouldn't be watching this right now. And that's the part people try to ignore because it's uncomfortable. It forces a decision, and decisions come with responsibility, because once you admit this isn't working the way it should, now you have to decide what you're going to do about it. And this is where the real separation happens, not in the workout, not in the programming, right here in this moment. Because there are people who will hear everything you just heard, and they'll go right back into the same environment tomorrow. Same structure, same compromises, same outcomes, and a year from now, nothing changes. Same questions, same frustrations, same plateau. And then there are people who reach a point where that's no longer acceptable, where good enough isn't enough anymore, where they stop negotiating with themselves and they decide, if I'm going to keep doing this, I'm going to do it the right way. I'm going to put myself in an environment that actually supports what I'm trying to do. Not one that forces me to constantly adjust. Not one that makes me guess. Not one that slowly pulls me backward while telling me I'm still moving forward. And once that decision is made, everything changes. Because now you're no longer trying to make a broken system work. You're looking for the right system. And that's where things get real. Because right now, if you're being honest, that system doesn't exist for you. Not in a way that's built specifically for how you train, how you recover, and what you actually want. And that leaves you in a tough position because you've outgrown what's available, but you don't yet have access to what you need. And that's where most people stay, right in that space, aware but stuck, knowing but not moving. And the longer you stay there, the easier it becomes to just accept it, to lower the standard, to stop pushing for more. Not because you can't, but because you've stopped expecting it. And that's the real loss. It's not performance, it's not results, it's the belief that you can still improve. Because once that goes, everything else follows. So now the question isn't whether this matters. You already know it does. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Because here's the reality. A year from now, this will exist. There will be a place built specifically for masters athletes who still want to compete. An environment where the standards are right, the structure is right, the expectations are right, where you don't have to adjust to the room because the room was built for you. That's going to happen. The only variable is who's part of it when it does. Because this doesn't get built by accident. It doesn't just show up. It gets built by a small group of people who see it before it exists and decide they're in. And for this, that number is 40. Not 400, not as many as we can get, 40. 40 masters athletes who are serious about how they train, serious about how they perform, and serious enough to step into something before it's finished. Because that's what this actually is. It's not a membership, it's not a typical gym, it's a founding group. The people who decide, this is what I've been looking for, and I'm not going to sit back and wait for someone else to build it. And I know this isn't for everyone. It shouldn't be. Most people will watch this, agree with it, and then go right back to what they've been doing. And that's fine. But there are a few people who hear this differently, who feel that gap more clearly, who know they're not done and don't want to train like they are. And if that's you, then you already know. You don't need to be convinced. You don't need more information. You just need to decide. Because a year from now, you're going to be in one of two positions. You're either going to be inside an environment that's pushing you forward, or you're going to be in the same place you are right now trying to make it work. And the difference between those two outcomes is not time, it's a decision. So if this hit, if you felt it, if you know you're not done yet, then step in. Be one of the 40 who builds it, or don't, but make that decision consciously. Because either way, you're choosing what the next year looks like.